So I've heard that some fans of the show The Boys are just now figuring out that the show is a parody and critique of right-wing America. I would say I don't believe it, but I did once watch The Purge election year with someone who told me, I don't see how the Purge movies are political. So, I guess anything is possible. Like Annie, aka Starlight, I grew up in the evangelical Christian world, so I've spotted quite a few instances where The Boys parodied evangelicalism. A quick reminder, Evangelical Christianity is not a specific Christian denomination. It's a fusion of Christian myth and identity with right-wing political ideology. Being all about Jesus doesn't make you an evangelical. Voting Republican doesn't make you an evangelical. But if you think Jesus chose a specific Republican candidate to be president and then commanded you to vote for him, you're probably an evangelical. Okay, spoiler warning for every season here, guys. Don't say I didn't warn you. Now, with that, let's get into every time The Boys parodied or significantly paralleled the evangelical Christian world. Episode numbers and timestamps will be on screen to help you keep up. Season 1, Episode 1. Starlight says in an interview with Vought,
I mean, why would you get into this business if not to save the world?
Here, Annie begins her religious character arc where she represents the idealistic young believer before becoming disillusioned with the faith or church. This was many of us ex-evangelicals back when we were young and naive. The folks at Vought are excited that this speech boosted Starlight's ratings with conservative Christians.
I haven't done anything yet.
Yeah, exactly. You're already up 2.5 points with Midwesterners and conservative Christians in 18 to 49.
Just like Vought, many real-world companies seek to appease this demographic because of their significant population and purchasing power. Ezekiel, the Capes for Christ preacher who preaches pray the gay away nonsense, is seen in a bar hooking up with multiple men. This is a clear parody of the many ex-gay and purity culture preachers caught with men. Poster boy for the conservative Christian ex-gay movement of the late 90s, John Polk, was caught and photographed in a gay bar in 2000. Years later, he came out publicly and disavowed conversion therapy.
I spent 20 years trying to change my sexual orientation and how it really fucked me up.
Evangelical pastor Ted Haggard was well known for opposing LGBT rights, until he became better known for hiring a male sex worker regularly for 3 years, doing hard drugs, and creeping on a young man in his congregation. Episode 2. A TV commercial for the Samaritan's Embrace Christian charity, featuring its leader Ezekiel, is shown. This organization is a parody of the real-life fundamentalist Christian charity Samaritan's Purse, run by Franklin Graham, son of the ultra-famous evangelist Billy Graham. Samaritan's Purse has been under scrutiny in recent years after a 2021 audit revealed their $1.2 billion in assets, nearly half of which was in cash or cash equivalents. Additionally, the non-profit organization tends to profit $200 to $300 million per year. What's the primary expense of Samaritan's Purse? Operation Christmas Child, where they send shoeboxes full of Christmas presents and fundamentalist propaganda to kids who might not receive anything for Christmas otherwise. Because they're Muslim. Yeah, Franklin Graham is totally in bed with the GOP, advocates for bans on Muslim immigrants to the US, and thinks he has to convert all Muslims for the safety of Americans. So I guess his organization finds Muslim families in the US and abroad and sends them unwanted mail. You might be shocked by just how easy it is to find people's personal information online, including their religious beliefs and addresses. Data brokers collect information from your online activity and sell it to all kinds of shady characters, like Samaritan's Purse, who use it to target and exploit you. This can result in spam calls, texts, emails, and maybe even shoeboxes full of terrible presents and propaganda. Luckily, there's a way to keep your data out of the wrong hands with Incogni, the sponsor of this video. This is a service that scours the internet for your personal information and gets it removed for you. You can even track the number of times Incogni has gotten your data out of others' hands. I use Incogni myself and can personally attest, Franklin Graham has never sent me fundamentalist propaganda.
People say, Franklin, where's my box? I don't know. It's going out there somewhere.
It also prevents me from being bombarded by spam when I'm just trying to watch TV in peace. So, give Incogni a try. Use code SKEPTIC at the link below and get 60% off an annual plan. Signing up supports my channel and protects your personal data at the same time. Episode 5. The Samaritans Embrace Believe Expo begins, and Starlight mentions the Christian circuit.
Just doing the whole Christian circuit thing. You know, Power Fest, Capes for Christ, Believe Expo.
We wore the tires off of that car. These people are like
Family to me.
The evangelical Christian world indeed has its own entertainment industry, including copious amounts of music festivals and so-called revivals, which attract tens of thousands of people each. Christian entertainers can make a career just out of working this Christian circuit with little to no name recognition outside of the Christian world. Ezekiel preaches that Jesus said,
"You shouldn't need proof. You should just believe because I say so, because you have faith."
Evangelicals aren't known as the most discerning people. Even their top philosophers, like William Lane Craig, find fancy ways of saying, "We don't need evidence, we already know the truth."
The way in which I know Christianity is true is first and foremost on the basis of the witness of the Holy Spirit in my heart, and that this gives me a self-authenticating means of knowing that Christianity is true wholly apart from the evidence. And therefore, if in some historically contingent circumstances the evidence that I have available to me should turn against Christianity, I don't think that that controverts the witness of the Holy Spirit.
Ezekiel says,
Why can Jesus walk on water? Why does Homelander fly? Because of the Lord. Because we were born with his power, because we believe.
Evangelicals often appeal to God's will to justify existing social hierarchies. Why does the pastor have the authority to tell you what to believe? He was chosen by God. Why is it right for men to rule over women? Because God wants it that way.
My wife is called to submit to me.
Evangelicals are particularly inclined to prop up Republican political candidates in this way. Remember when evangelicals started claiming that Trump was chosen by God to save America, and then he did a bunch of crimes, got impeached, and lost an election, and evangelicals called that satanic persecution? Yeah. Maybe the boys wasn't harsh enough with this parody. Conversion therapy propaganda is seen at Believe Expo, followed by an anti-marriage equality poster. Most evangelicals oppose marriage equality, and programs aimed at changing or suppressing the sexuality of LGBT people are still common in their circles. Current high-profile conversion programs include Rainbow Revival, the Change Movement, the Holy Sexuality Project, and ATCSI, though most conversion programs are local, church-based, and keep a low profile to avoid investigation into their abusive practices. A teen at Believe Expo asks Starlight about converting her Hindu friend. Starlight says,
Jesus also says to love your neighbor.
but a priest replies,
But if you love your neighbor, don't you want to save them from damnation?
Real-world Christian apologists like Frank Turek are particularly fond of this line of reasoning, especially in reference to condemning LGBT people and those of other faiths.
Christ died for everyone. So just because you may disagree on their behavior and what they're doing doesn't mean you can't love them. In fact, to love them, you have to disagree with what they're doing.
A teen asks Starlight if she's ever had sex. Starlight is pressured to say she's a virgin. This is what we call purity culture. Christian figures, especially women, are expected to have squeaky clean reputations of chastity, or else they're considered impure and bad examples. Realistic expectations don't matter, and even consensual sex is demonized. Ironically, this leads many Christians to lie about their sexual history, even though lying is supposedly a sin in itself. Homelander says about the audience at Believe Expo,
people are scared. They don't trust Washington or the coastal elite, and they hate foreigners. What they want is a little John Wayne, frontier justice.
Evangelicals are known to praise masculinity and violence embodied in people like John Wayne. This is literally the premise of the incredible book Jesus and John Wayne by Kristen Dumez. This form of what you might call idolatry is something I'd argue distinguishes evangelical Christianity from other Christian groups. Believe it or not, a lot of Christians across the world don't think Christ-likeness is best expressed through violence. Homelander and Ezekiel baptize people who paid $15,000 each for a VIP package. This parodies the common practice of selling VIP tickets to Christian events. Expensive backstage passes are normal in the entertainment world, but when you add a spiritual element to it, it starts to feel like blatant exploitation. Hillsong United, Chris Tomlin, and Ali B. Stuckey have all been criticized in recent years for selling VIP packages to their events. But hey, that's just business. Huey confronts Ezekiel for running drugs, specifically Compound V, labeled as polio vaccine through Samaritan's Embrace. Plenty of pastors, like megachurch pastor John Bishop, have been caught running drugs. He's out of prison and preaching again, by the way. Occasionally, entire Christian ministries have been revealed to be fronts for organized crime. Homelander says God wants him to hunt down terrorists to deliver God's judgment, and then says he doesn't answer to Congress.
I answer to a higher.
Wasn't I chosen to save you? Is it not my God-given purpose to protect the United States of America?
So, do you guys remember when the President of the United States himself was saying this about the war on terror?
In June 2003, then President Bush reportedly having claimed that God told him to go to war. Mr. Bush reported as having said, quote, God would tell me, George, go and fight those terrorists in Afghanistan, and I did. And then God would tell me, George, go and end the tyranny in Iraq, and I did.
I would argue that Bush actually believed this, while Homelander obviously doesn't. But the parody is still pretty effective.
May God bless our country and all who defend her.
Annie tells her mom she doesn't see this industry the same way anymore and wants out. Her mom makes it about herself and urges Annie not to embarrass her in front of her friends. This is a common dynamic that ex-evangelicals have with their parents. A young adult says they can't support the institutions in which they were raised with a clear conscience, and their parents call their child selfish, while ironically caring more about their own standing in the church than any larger moral issue in play. Evangelicalism is not big on the concept of systemic harm or injustice, so I think a lot of parents struggle to understand why their kids might prioritize fighting that over being praised as a good person by other evangelicals. Starlight is supposed to give her Christian testimony on stage, but instead calls out the Believe Expo for charging people to hear how to get to heaven. She says everyone there is too certain. She casts doubts on interpreting the Bible literally, and scorns the doctrine that being LGBT, having premarital sex, or believing differently earns you an eternity in hell. A lot of evangelical kids are raised to care deeply about speaking the truth publicly, which often backfires when those kids grow up and become aware of the problems in evangelicalism. Countless ex-evangelicals like myself speak out just like Starlight did here. Vought News gives negative coverage of Starlight questioning the faith. Vought News is a clear parody of Fox News, which also cynically appeals to the biases of evangelical Christians. They wouldn't want to alienate one of their biggest target demographics. Episode 6. The network NNC discusses Starlight's speech and provides more sympathetic coverage. This is a clear parody of CNN, which is a lot less interested in appealing to evangelicals. On to Season 2. Episode 1. Annie and Gecko mention Capes for Christ Bible Camp.
Yeah, the Capes for Christ Bible Camp. Yes, totally.
That passion play we put on, you were the best, Jesus.
I mean, no one's gonna take a nail through the hand like I can.
And big game was Pontius Pilate.
There are countless Bible camps across America, and basically all millennials I know who were raised evangelical attended one as a kid. Now, passion plays are reenactments of Jesus' ministry. They always include his crucifixion, resurrection, and ascension, but often include earlier parts of the story too. These are put on for audiences of all sizes, from local churches all the way up to international audiences of thousands. One of the most widely known passion plays is The Great Passion Play, put on regularly in a Christian theme park in Eureka Springs, Arkansas. Fun fact, this specific play began running in 1968 and was founded by Gerald Lyman Kenneth Smith, an active member of the KKK, who also ran for president with his own Christian Nationalist Party.
He's a wound heavyweight.
The guy also erected the largest Jesus statue in the US, as far as I know. Yeah, I went there and it looks like absolute shit.
Why is he so thick?
It's supposed to be Jesus from the back.
Annie says she didn't make out with Big Game because she was told God was watching. She regrets not doing this and says,
There's nobody in the sky watching over us. Not God, not Homelander. Not anybody.
The hip evangelicals would say Annie has deconstructed purity culture and deconverted from Christianity. She sees that earthly authorities conflated themselves with God in order to control people, a frightening but also liberating realization for folks like me. Episode 3. NNC News announces that superheroes are man-made. Supes are then seen crying in existential crisis. This parallels the existential crisis many believers have when they learn information hidden from them as kids and come to see their religious community's ideas as unjust, anti-intellectual, and authoritarian. Okay, maybe this wasn't an intentional parody at all, but I wanted to include it. Vought sends thoughts and prayers to people affected by a super terrorist attack, which was actually Stormfront. Evangelicals regularly offer empty platitudes like thoughts and prayers to people in crisis, which is especially ironic when it comes to something like climate change-related disasters, imprisonment of children at border facilities, or death of unvaccinated people during pandemics, because evangelicals actively support the causes of all of those crises. Like Vought, they sometimes get to cause a problem, pose as the solution, and bask in the glory of being called the good guy.
Right now, let's focus on the families. They deserve that. They need our love. They need our prayers.
Episode 7. Stormfront and Homelander disavow the shooting of a racial minority, sending more thoughts and prayers, even though it was their propaganda that motivated the killing. This parodies how white Christian nationalist pundits and politicians publicly disavow hate crimes, particularly the drastic increase in anti-Muslim assaults in 2016, while simultaneously producing content which fuels the fire of discrimination against various minorities. Homelander says this used to be a beautiful country.
Remember? One nation under God. Remember? Right before these godless, inhuman supervillains started pouring across our borders and dragging us down into their mud.
This parodies how certain right-wing pundits and Republican politicians dog-whistled to white Christian nationalists when addressing the public.
When Mexico sends its people, they're not sending their best. They're bringing drugs. They're bringing crime, they're rapists, and some, I assume, are good people.
Just how this is a part of Stormfront's longtime plan to create a nation of racially pure white supes, real-life dog whistling exists as a part of a longtime plan to seize total control of America for the religious right, an effort organized most notably by evangelical Paul Michael Weyrich.
They want everybody to vote. I don't want everybody to vote. Elections are not won by a majority of people. They never have been from the beginning of our country, and they are not now.
Make no mistake about it. We are talking about Christianizing America.
I highly recommend the documentary Bad Faith, which explains this well. It's streaming on Amazon Prime and a few other places. Stormfront says,
has there ever been anyone in history more persecuted just for trying to protect their own?
This parodies the persecution narrative of the white Christian right, who purposely misrepresent legal protections of minority groups as the removal of rights for white Christians. This can be seen as an extension of the Great Replacement conspiracy theory, an idea pushed by white supremacist groups like the KKK, but is now popular with pundits like Matt Walsh and Tucker Carlson. Episode 8. Homelander appears in a school shooter safety video where he mentions teachers having an authorized firearm. This parodies school shooter drill videos, of course, but it also pokes fun at the Republican proposed policy of giving school teachers guns to stop school shooters instead of, doing what every other country has done to successfully prevent school shootings. If you're wondering why I bring this up when it doesn't appear to have much to do with evangelicalism, just you wait until we discuss Season 4. It'll all make sense then. Stormfront says her infamous line,
people love what I have to say. They believe in it. They just don't like the word Nazi. That's all.
Evangelical Christians almost universally don't like Nazis, obviously. However, present them with a vision of white Christian nationalism, complete with authoritarian Christian leaders, extreme American exceptionalism, persecution of minorities, and paranoid xenophobia, and many approve.
When Joe Biden ordered to cut that razor wire, I ordered the National Guard to triple the razor wire on the border.
As an evangelical kid, I was taught racism and bigotry are horrible sins. But I was also instructed to view these things as primarily directed at white conservative Christians today. In this way, evangelicals can come to scorn Nazism while simultaneously upholding a form of their white Christian nationalism.
It's called white genocide.
Okay, we've made it to Season 3. There weren't as many references here, but Season 4 will more than make up for it. Episode 1. Starlight tells Huey that she and Supersonic only had sex a couple of times because they were very religious and it felt weird to have sex while not married.
So it felt weird having sex. I mean, sex. We did a ton of butt stuff.
This is a reference to the aptly named Poop Hole Loophole, where young unmarried Christians supposedly do butt stuff instead of vaginal intercourse because they believe it has not been explicitly called a sin. While this is a popular joke about conservative Christians, this is not actually very common. Most do not see anal sex as less sinful than vaginal sex for unmarried people, and many actually believe anal sex to be sinful in any context. Episode 2. Gunpowder says that if a liberal wins the White House, schools are going to teach kids to hate America and the Constitution. This is similar to the talking points of the Christian right, who have long taken issue with the godless liberal teachings in public schools. One of the primary goals of the Christian right at the moment is actually to terminate the Department of Education, dismantle the public education system, and channel tax money to private religious schools. This is a part of the already infamous Project 2025. Homelander says to a suicidal teen that suicide is a slap in the Lord's face and will send you to hell. Homelander's callous attitude towards suicidal ideation fits well with this real doctrine in certain Christian sects. I didn't grow up believing suicide damned you to hell, but I know people who did. After Stormfront dies, men march with tiki torches to commemorate her. This is a parody of the Unite the Right rally held in Charlottesville, Virginia in August 2017. I don't think many people at the time would have associated this event with evangelical Christianity, but with the rise of awareness of white Christian nationalism in evangelical culture today, you might see why I do. Episode 7. Homelander starts a rumor that Starlight engages in human trafficking. This serves to discredit her. Claiming that Democratic politicians and liberal celebrities do this has become a broad trend in right-wing America, which started with QAnon. The idea that there is a satanic, liberal conspiracy to traffic people, especially kids, has picked up steam among conservative Christians, thanks especially to movies like Sound of Freedom. This indie film's theatrical release was entirely crowdfunded through Angel Studios, a Christian film distributor. Also, the guy the story is based on and the guy who plays the main character are huge into QAnon. Episode 8. Counter-protesters oppose Starlight's activism, holding up a sign that says, God, Guns, and Homelander, while chanting, This parodies the way American evangelicals associate loyalty to God with nationalism, gun rights, and loyalty to propagandistic strongman figures like Homelander, Trump, Putin, or Mark Driscoll. They then parrot conspiracy theories spread by these figures, thinking they're doing God's will. Black Noir lays dying when his hallucinatory beaver friend tells him,
Soon you'll be in the sweet embrace of Christ the Lord.
Noir is depicted as childlike after Soldier Boy beats part of his brain out. Him actually believing the Christian message which Vought pretends to stand by, I think, serves to show his naivety, and perhaps comment on the naivety of certain Christians in the real world. A news report reads, Soldier Boy statue toppled. Storm chaser who accused Starlight of child abuse is a registered sex offender. This parodies how some conservative Christians who make false accusations of child abuse and trafficking turn out to be guilty of what they accuse others of. Tim Ballard, a QAnon believer whose story served as the basis for Sound of Freedom, is under serious investigation for sexual assault. He supposedly cares so much about stopping abuse, but not enough to stop abusing women himself. Okay, we've made it to this scene. Homelander kills a counter-protester. The crowd present cheers on the murder while holding up signs about American safety and God. While conservative Christians call for family values, child safety, and Christ-likeness, they often advocate for policies and politicians which do not stop threats to Americans, such as police brutality, school shootings, war efforts, etc. This scene is a disturbingly masterful satire of that hypocrisy. Now finally, on to Season 4, Episode 1. Firecracker makes her first appearance, accusing the man who Homelander killed of being a pedo. She has a DeSantis sticker in the background. She also says,
"An eye for an eye might be in the Jew section of the Bible, but it is still in the Bible."
Firecracker is a mix of popular white Christian nationalist figures like Nick Fuentes, Laura Loomer, and Matt Walsh, but has the accent of someone like Marjorie Taylor Greene.
You don't get to ask any more questions. I'm done with you.
Like these real-life pundits, Firecracker is more brazen with her lies, racism, and politicized Christianity than even the generation before her, and of course supports far-right political candidates. Oh, also, her show is called Truth Bomb, and I've got to point out that the real-life right-wing media company, The Daily Wire, actually sells Truth Bomb collectibles. Don't drop bombs, drop truth bombs, their site says. Oh, so that must be what they keep encouraging America to send Israel to drop on Palestinian civilians. Okay, yeah, the Daily Wire is more adjacent to the evangelical space than fully in it, but I couldn't resist. Firecracker's show appears again. An Instagram handle, Starlight House of Sin, appears as a related account. This Instagram handle is a parody of religiously motivated meme pages like End Wokeness and Libs of TikTok that spread false narratives about social issues, particularly LGBT issues. Firecracker says,
Now, the only thing these teens are at risk of is being groomed and thrown into Starlight's LGBT terror dungeon.
This is another parody of the paranoid anti-LGBT groomer conspiracy of Qanon and pundits like Matt Walsh and Chaya Raichuk. A banner on the news says, Ezekiel, I pray the jury ends this miscarriage of justice. This is in reference to Homelander being tried for murder after murdering someone. In real life, the head of Samaritan's Purse, Franklin Graham, has supported Trump through impeachment, multiple criminal trials, and convictions. Evangelical loyalty does not often waver when the powerful figures they support act in contradiction to the Christian values of love, peace, and justice. Episode 2. Huey's mom is a vitality consultant and tries to use essential oils and other quack cures on Huey's dad, who is in a coma. Oh, for you guys who have been watching my channel a long time, you know how personal this one is to me. This parodies multi-level marketing schemes like Amway, doTERRA, and Young Living essential oils, which are deeply integrated into the white Christian nationalist world. Amway has provided some of the largest donations to the RNC in history, and in the late 90s was set to have its own informal caucus made up of 5 Republican House members who were also Amway distributors. Secretary of Education in the Trump administration, Betsy DeVos, is married to Amway's CEO. Young Living essential oils and doTERRA are run by Christians who say God commanded them to save the world with their products. Yeah, right. I've actually made some videos about how Young Living is kind of its own religious sect at the intersection of New Age, Mormonism, and Evangelicalism. It's very common for middle-aged Christian women to be targeted by these companies. Sage says that Ryan's brand needs to be that he was chosen by God to be the one who saves the world. Evangelicals have literally described their political candidates, especially Trump, as the one chosen by God to save the world. Or at least, the important part of the world, America. The boys visit TruthCon, a conspiracy convention. Signs with God, guns, and coffee, and Jesus with an AK-47 are visible near a flat earth presentation. An RIP USA sign with a cross is also visible. As you've probably gathered from my discussion of QAnon, evangelicals are known to be susceptible to conspiracy theories. Many flat earthers believe the idea of a round earth is a satanic plot to hide God somehow.
And one of the rules of power is you never admit that there's someone bigger than yourself.
Certainly not all evangelicals go that far with conspiracy theories, but when you do believe that you're in a spiritual and political war with supreme evil, it's easy to get into some really wacky stuff. More displays at TruthCon describe satanic conspiracies involving liberal politicians and Starlight, climate change being a hoax, gun rights, and white power. All of these ideas are found in the evangelical Christian world. Again, not all believe or even approve of them, but they definitely do exist in those spaces more often than in most religious or political groups. Firecracker says Starlight
works with Oprah and Tom Hanks to set up a satanic home delivery service,
which delivers trafficked children. She specifically mentions forced trans surgery and adrenochrome. QAnon spins conspiracies about satanic human trafficking, which include Oprah, Tom Hanks, and harvesting adrenochrome from children. The idea of forced trans surgery on children is a conspiracy that has, in my view, grown much larger than QAnon thanks to people like Matt Walsh. I know a lot of evangelicals in my personal life, and I'd say most believe this insane lie. Honestly, most just don't know anything about trans people or their health care and are easily scared into believing this kind of stuff. Sage asks Firecracker if she actually believes what she says and what she is selling. Firecracker says,
Which would you rather believe, that you belong to a community of warriors battling a secret evil, or that you're a lonely, inconsequential nobody that no one will ever remember?
This is an instance of saying the quiet part out loud. The sociologists and religion scholars I've interviewed on my channel hypothesize that one reason conspiracies and narratives of the demonic thrive is the feeling of uniqueness, power, and identity people derive from them. This is what many like myself think is behind much of the adherence to evangelical Christian ideas.
I do think the appeal is, I know something that other people don't know. I know this kind of secret conspiracy lore about what the demons are up to, their hierarchies and so forth. And so yeah, I do think that people feel a lot of pleasure knowing that kind of stuff.
Episode 3. Homelander says Starlighters want to get rid of him and replace his fans with
some godless, non-binary socialists like them.
This is a line that wouldn't be out of the ordinary for white Christian nationalist figures like Matt Walsh or Mark Driscoll to say to their fans. It's another extension of the Great Replacement conspiracy theory. Firecracker says Starlight gives vaccines that cause autism.
These quote-unquote vaccines that they're giving out at the Starlight House actually cause autism.
While this used to be a much more fringe and more often left-wing conspiracy, this anti-vax attitude is very common among evangelicals today. Pretty much all the evangelicals I know are skeptical of vaccines, and maybe a little less than half are totally anti-vax. Firecracker says of Starlight,
If she really cared about women, why push to let these transgenders into the girls' bathrooms? Because
this has become a common talking point among white Christian nationalists like Matt Walsh, and even Christian apologists like Sean McDowell and Frank Turek. The trans panic is definitely the new satanic panic. A man enters Starlight House asking where the sex slaves and child porn are, then pulls a gun. This parodies Pizzagate, where a man acted on the QAnon conspiracy that the Democratic Party, especially Hillary Clinton, was sex trafficking kids through a pizza restaurant. Firecracker has a Jesus Guns Babies sign in her room at Vought Tower. Okay, this is one of my favorites in the whole series. The props team on The Boys did not take any creative liberties with this at all. Real-life Republican candidate for governor of Georgia, Candace Taylor, campaigned with signs that said, Jesus, guns, babies. You know, listening to her on the campaign trail, I think maybe she inspired Firecracker's accent too.
The Constitution says when you commit treason, it's death by firing squad. I didn't write it. It's in there.
Vought on Ice practices the song, Put the Christ Back in Christmas. Ah yes, the war on Christmas rhetoric that evangelical Christians whip out year after year, even though there is no real effort to cancel Christmas. The claim that tolerance for pluralism, different holidays for different people, is an attack on Christian tradition is a Christian nationalist talking point. It acts as yet another extension of the Great Replacement conspiracy theory. Like the song says, evangelicals believe Sage tells Newman to ban all books and teachers which teach critical soup theory. Obviously, this is a reference to critical race theory. Removing CRT from schools, even where it doesn't exist, has been a focus of white Christian nationalists in recent years. The goal here, as far-right political strategist Christopher Rufo has articulated, is to incite distrust in existing educational institutions, destroy the public education system, and rebuild educational institutions to fit white conservative sensibilities. This is why I have trouble believing in conspiracy theories involving secrecy and hidden agendas. The people responsible for actual conspiracies can just say the stuff out loud and still have their plan work. Episode 4. Firecracker announces Kanye West as a guest on her show, but first, a sermon from Ezekiel. For a time, Kanye West was super conservative Christian, even speaking at Joel Osteen's megachurch and producing a gospel album. Of course, he later went full-on white nationalist, but that shouldn't really surprise anyone who's been recognizing the overlap between those worlds so far. Butcher tells Firecracker,
"Just weren't sure whether you wanted us to kneel before you cross or burn it."
This is a reference to the KKK burning crosses. They are an explicitly Christian group, after all. Butcher reveals Firecracker had sex with a 15-year-old when she was a counselor at Capes for Christ Bible Camp. They say statutory won't land well with her evangelical audience, but Firecracker leaks that information herself. Oh, how naive these guys are. Firecracker, like any pundit appealing to an evangelical base, knows there's an easy way to get out of being blamed for any misdeed. Stay tuned. Ezekiel does some crazy numerology to prove Starlight is demonic.
Upside down. Any January. 12 letters. That's 2 more 6s. 666. What more proof could you possibly need?
This is a common tactic in the evangelical world to prove anything they don't like is somehow supremely evil.
Rainbow Revival, we do use the rainbow. We use the 7-colored rainbow, not 6. So the LGBT community will use 6 colors, and we won't unpack all that, but we can kind of see what 6 sometimes symbolizes, right, in Scripture.
Firecracker says her statutory rape of the 15-year-old Bible camper
was also the moment that pushed me to my eternal salvation. I was born again, and my sins were washed away by the tears of his love.
This is a common tactic for people in the conservative sphere to escape moral condemnation from their base. Evangelicals forgive Trump for affairs and criminal activity because God can use anyone. It is biblical, after all. King David, the man after God's own heart, was a rapist and murderer, but God still used him to build his kingdom. Firecracker reveals that Starlight had an abortion and calls her a baby killer. This is the evangelical position on abortion today, that it's murder. Interestingly, evangelicals didn't have a strong stance on abortion until the 1980s, when political efforts were made to galvanize a new voter base for Republican candidates. That worked, and ever since, evangelicals have seen abortion as perhaps the only sin they can't forgive. Starlight's mom won't return her calls after hearing she got an abortion. This parallels the real experiences of people with evangelical parents who come out as gay or trans, join another religion, or worst of all, have an abortion. Certain parents consider these things an offense heinous enough to justify ignoring their own child. Episode 5. Firecracker says her fight against Starlight is a biblical war of good versus evil. Right-wing conspiracy theorist nutjobs appeal to Christian myths to claim authority for their views. Who knew? Firecracker brings on a special guest to her show.
Dr. Dorian Boone. Dr. Boone, what'd Starlight's baby feel when she murdered him?
There was a study done at Samaritan's Embrace University.
This parodies Christian anti-abortion groups which pose as legitimate medical organizations and attempt to make scientific arguments against abortion. While a majority of OBGYNs are pro-choice, these organizations platform a minority of doctors who are not, and attempt to portray them as representative of the medical field as a whole. A new movie or show called Firecracker Lord's Warrior is announced for the new Vought studio division, Vought Faith. This parodies the Evangelical Christian studio and streaming service PureFlix, which makes infamous garbage like the God's Not Dead franchise. Right-wing pundits commonly endorse or even participate in such movies, like when Sean Hannity played himself in Kevin Sorbo's Let There Be Light. Episode 6. Firecracker reports on a news story about Jewish space lasers. There's no way anyone doesn't know this one, right? White Christian nationalist Marjorie Taylor Greene blamed 2018's California wildfires on space solar generators funded by mysterious backers. This was soon rephrased as Jewish space lasers. At a party with the super-rich elite, Newman says,
I just had abortion mansplained to me by a guy who refuses to be alone with any woman who isn't his wife. Or mistress.
The famous Billy Graham rule, which Graham and his ministry team followed in their day, was never be alone with a woman to whom you are not married. Former Vice President Mike Pence, an evangelical Christian, famously followed the rule. A politician partygoer says,
This is a white Christian nation founded on white Christian values.
This is a direct avowal of white Christian nationalism, and the Supreme Court comment parallels how real-life white Christian nationalists plan to further pack the Supreme Court with far-right Christian justices as a part of Project 2025. It's revealed that Tech Knight is to use his prisons as internment camps for dissidents after a coup on the US. Steve Bannon, the former Trump political strategist, has stated that those who oppose Christian nationalism should be purged. Some have speculated that this would mean sending dissidents to internment camps. Episode 7.
Why the long face?
Antifa.
A kids show tells kids to report their families to authorities for being Antifa if they dislike soups or are gay. After Roe v. Wade was overturned and Texas made abortion all but totally illegal, sites like prolifewhistleblower.com began so that people could basically snitch on someone for having an abortion. Around the same time, Texas Governor Greg Abbott directed state agencies to investigate gender-affirming care for minors as child abuse. This meant interrogating teachers to get them to tell on students, interrogating students to get them to tell on their parents, and interrogating parents to reveal their so-called abuse in the form of actual evidence-based gender-affirming care. Through these efforts, conservative Christian politicians have attempted to pit families against each other as a means of control. Firecracker mentions a very special advertiser on her show.
Cameron golfed with Mike Lindell, who just pulled $50 million worth of pillow commercials. You call that harmless?
Mike Lindell is a real-life, hardcore evangelical Christian and Trump supporter who is obsessed with election fraud. He's the exact type who would advertise on Firecracker's show. Annie's mom shames her for having an abortion and blames her for the poor treatment she gets from her church friends. This is an eerily realistic conversation between an evangelical parent and their child who sinned. Evangelical parents will blame their kids for the abuse the church community doles out on the parent, instead of questioning the church community's right to do that. The crew discovers detail assignments for a coup to take place on January 6th, which would take out Singer and install Newman as president. I'm going to be honest with you, if you don't know what the real-life parallel for this is, I don't know what to tell you. Episode 8. Pro-soup politicians show undue skepticism toward the election results while certifying the election of Bob Singer. This parodies the real-life skepticism of those Christian conservative politicians who cried fraud in the 2020 election and in the process of certifying the election of Joe Biden on January 6, 2021. Firecracker says on her show,
But it is time for the Great Awakening. Where we go one, we go vot, y'all.
The Great Awakening is a phrase used by QAnon to describe the hypothetical future where Donald Trump had seized power and revealed the truth of QAnon's conspiracy theories. Where we go one, we go all is a rallying cry for QAnon. The new white Christian nationalist and pro-soup president declares martial law and deputizes loyal soups to round up their political enemies. This is basically QAnon's end goal and is called the Storm. This is a day where President Trump would declare martial law, call on his military allies to round up all political enemies, and send them to Guantanamo Bay for execution. Firecracker says,
We wake up to a new world where hope, purity, and Jesus' love shine down upon us all.
Claiming the authority of God, invoking the name of Jesus, and galvanizing political support under the guise of spreading Christian virtue has been nothing more than a cynical plot for the powerful few to cement their power permanently. Countless lives, both Christian and non-Christian, conservative and liberal, are destroyed under this tyranny. This is true both in the plot of this show and in the real world. And that's the show so far. Did I miss anything? Was there anything in the show that you didn't realize was a direct parody or parallel of the real world? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching. I've been Drew of Genetically Modified Skeptic. Thank you to Eric Murphy for his incredible editing on these media reviews. You guys think I could do that myself? No way. A special thanks to my patrons for their constant love and support. If you want to hear more from me, then subscribe. As always, if you are an apostate in need, there are resources linked in the description to help you find community and mental health support. Remember to be kind to others in the comments, and until next time, stay skeptical.